This episode is brought to you by freedadcourse.com. You are always one conversation away from changing your life, and the power of hello is something that I subscribe to every single day, and I'm always saying hello to new people everywhere I go. Increasing your opportunity, increasing your connection, and getting access to the solutions to the problems that you are facing, whether you're on active duty or just beginning your veteran transition or even transitioning out for 20 years. On the other side of hello are the solutions that you're looking for. Again, head on over to freedadcourse.com. Get your 5-episode audio course to create more connection, create more friendships, and get back to living the life that you're trying to design.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home. Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to the Military Veteran Dad, episode 38. Today's episode, my intro, sounds a little bit funny, and I'm going to give you a quick story about starving your fear, going all in, and sometimes, as they maybe say in the Air Force, because I wasn't in the Air Force, you just got to wing it. That I'm at right now Military Influencer Conference in Washington, D.C., which is a conference that brings all the military influencers together to network and grow their businesses. And on my way here, I got to the airport and I did not have my luggage. In that luggage was my podcast microphone where I would have recorded my intro for this episode. I left that luggage back at home, and I had a split decision of either catching a flight in the morning that I was on and being able to see DC yesterday, or drive home, change my flights, get my bags, and miss the sightseeing that I was able to do yesterday. And I ultimately said, I'm going to wing it. I'm going to go for it. I got in an airplane with nothing but my backpack and got to see DC, did some shopping last night. And my big takeaway is I am still here. I am still alive. And the worst that could happen was nothing. And I really hit bottom when I forgot my suitcase, and I'm on my way up. So that's a quick story why this audio sounds a little bit funny, because I'm recording it on my iPhone right now. But today's episode is with Thom Hart. Thom is the founder of StagePass, an experienced marketplace for audiences to support their favorite creatives. He is also the host of the Traction, Growth, and Income podcast, which helps creatives turn their creative passions into businesses. Thom is an active duty Air Force officer whose wife is in the Army. And this is actually the first time that they've been together in 5 years at the same base. They just PCS'd to Hawaii, and they're expecting their first child this coming year. And Thom just gives a very good perspective on what he's going through, what he's feeling, what he's working through in his marriage, especially this being the first time they've been able to live in the same house under the same roof after being married for 5 years. And we go through a lot of the different areas that dads are struggling with when they become a dad. And I share some of the wisdom that I've got from 3 kids and what I've learned through that process of having 1, 2, and 3, and what it's like when you go through that and all the things they tell you you have to do, but at the same time, you really don't. So if you're an expecting dad, this episode is perfect for you, because we're going to starve some fear. We're going to hopefully remove some of that fear and tell you it's going to be okay. You're going to get to the other side. You're going to be a great dad. You're going to be a great dad. And it's all going to work out. So without further ado, Thom Hart.
Welcome to the show, Thom. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's good to be here.
It's crazy when I first met you at Podcast Movement, and you were saying that you were just getting ready to PCS to Hawaii. How was the move for you? And how was Hawaii settling?
It was quick. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but my wife is actually already here. So I took permissive TDY, so house hunting TDY, for all you military folks that are familiar with that, to go and find a house with my wife, Morgan, in June. And so I left from Austin, Texas, took 10 days, tried to find a place in Honolulu with Morgan. She's actually Army. So I'm Air Force and she's Army. So tried to find a place with her, ended up being too expensive. So we decided to live on base. So she's actually lived on base now for 2 months. And so when I got here, it was last Friday. So about a week ago, and she picked me up at the airport. I went home, dropped my bags off, checked in at work. So it was a really, really easy transition. Not so much for her. And I felt bad because she's pregnant now. Mm-hmm. And so I told her not to unpack anything because I wanted to do that when I got here. So I did get here and she had unpacked a few things, but there's still a lot of boxes that we had left to rummage through and unpack and things like that. So easy transition, but it was because my wife had to suffer a little bit more than me. But we were able to kind of line up house hunting so that it worked out really nicely.
Is the on-base housing pretty full there? Is that why you had to go there to try to find a house off-base?
So we thought it would be full, and it turns out that we were kind of off cycle from the normal PCS range. So later in the middle of June to end of August is really when the PCS summer cycle hits for Hawaii. And so we thought that there wouldn't be much housing on base. And so we started looking around. We thought with the BAH, we'd be able to find something nice. BAH for our pay band is, it's nice. It's good. And for two, military officers, it's really, we can live pretty comfortably. And, looking around, we're like, well, we don't want to deal with the commute. So we checked on base, and for the price, the comparable price on base for what we'd be paying on the economy, we could get central air. We could get 3 beds, 2 baths, 1,600 square feet, which you'd have to pay something like $600,000 if you wanted to buy on the economy, plus the commute. And then we'd heard horror stories about military being targeted off base, and just because the locals here think that being in the military, being transient in this location, having the housing allowance and everything like that, you're really well off. And that's not necessarily untrue, but you get targeted unfairly. And so we thought, with all of those factors, it'd be nice to have the lawn and have a nice house with one on the way, having that extra bedroom, because we were looking at 2 beds, 2 baths, and being able to live on base with a community where it feels like Pleasantville. I just figured this out last week. I walk 0.56 miles to work every morning, which is great. So I couldn't ask for anything nicer. This has been the nicest base that I've lived thus far. And, it's easy to say because it's like Pleasantville, but we're really, really lucky and blessed.
It sounds like you're almost going to be a dad with training wheels, that you got a nice short commute. You don't have a lot of like 30 minutes trying to come home. You got a nice community to support you, and about as good of terms that you can become a dad as you can imagine.
We're really lucky. Yeah, definitely.
So I have to ask the question, has Hawaii been what you thought it was going to be from just a visual, or was your like expectations a little higher, or was it like everything that you've ever thought about it and more?
Well, yeah, the environment has been everything I thought it would be. The temperature, the breeze, the beach, the water. Morgan's 27th birthday was last weekend, and so I took her out on a catamaran. So I took her out snorkeling. So I got in on Friday, and then Sunday we were out on a catamaran celebrating her 27th, which was great timing because, had they pushed back my orders by a couple of days, then I wouldn't have been able to be in person celebrating with her. So I took her on a catamaran. The water was gorgeous. We went to a reef, got to see her favorite animal, which is a sea turtle. So we saw like 3 sea turtles while we were snorkeling, which was amazing. The housing, not so much though. I thought that everything would be paradise and everything would be modern and upgraded, kind of like what Austin had, but just in Honolulu. And not necessarily the case. When you go outside of the Honolulu city proper, things start to look like shanties. And that's nothing against the culture here or their homes or their builders, but it's just I had higher hopes, higher expectations. The places that we did visit while we were searching for a house on the economy, a lot of them didn't have air conditioning. They were.
I know that you said that as a bullet point. I can't imagine people in Okinawa, or not Okinawa, but Hawaii, living without air conditioning.
I couldn't imagine that either. But they said with the trade winds and the temperature, it was fine. So you just open windows on the opposite side of your home and you get a breeze coming through, and it's effectively like air conditioning. And I was like, coming from the mainland, that's not something that I want to have to contend with. I wanted air conditioning. So, having a place that had air conditioning is really, really nice. And then the economy, that was a surprise. Having everything be so expensive. We went out for dinner to celebrate both being together. So this, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but this is the first time we've lived together in 5 years. So we can talk about that, but, so we celebrated, the fact that we were living together for the first time in a long time, and we went out to dinner and it was like $70, just a casual place, but that's just the cost of eating out here.
Your Texas Roadhouse was $70 type place.
Yeah. It's insane.
I remember when I lived in Okinawa, the price of stuff wasn't so crazy in Okinawa, but probably the culture and the climate are very similar, where you do get a good breeze. But I'll never forget the amount of humidity was in Okinawa. It was like breathing underwater in that hot tropical environment, and it's just crazy. You can't explain it until you've experienced it, how much humidity is actually there. Is it pretty humid in Hawaii, or is the breeze kill it pretty good?
The breeze helps it, but my boss was saying that September and October are actually worse than July and August because the trade winds die off as it starts to wind down and it turns into the rainy season. They say there's 2 summers here, one's rainy and one's hot. And so he said, as it prepares itself to enter the rainy season, the winds die off and it just becomes humid and sticky. I'm like, well, I just moved from Austin. I feel like I can cope with it. But
and probably a layman's term would be, as like the summer literally transitions across the equator to the southern hemisphere, there's probably just that cycle of changing that it resets itself.
Yeah, definitely.
So unpack a little bit about that. This is the first time that you've lived with your wife.
Yeah. So we both went to school together. We did undergrad together. We actually met on an internship. And so we were out in Boston together at the same place. We were at a defense contractor called Lincoln Labs and doing that. And we met each other the summer before our senior year. So she was an electrical engineer and I was studying physics. And we met each other at a safety brief of all places and decided to hang out because we were, just a few of the classmates that we had that were there at that internship. And so we started hanging out. I just broken up with a girlfriend, eventually started seeing movies together and going out to dinner together and not really expecting much of it. But eventually it turned into a relationship and we dated all throughout senior year. And prior to senior year, I had applied to cross into the Air Force. So we both went to school at West Point. And so everyone's expected to commission into the Army. Having studied physics there, I kind of wanted to continue research and do that in the Air Force. And so I applied to be a physicist in the Air Force. And senior year, we found out that I was selected to be a part of the Air Force. And so I would cross into the Air Force upon graduation. But up until graduation, I had the option to stay Army or go Air Force. And in the Army, I was selected as a signal officer. So I would have been stationed at Kansas at Fort Riley. And she got aviation. So she knew that she was going to be at Fort Rucker in Alabama. And so the decision was, what should we do? Should we stay Army and hope that you get assigned to the Combat Aviation Brigade out at Fort Riley after flight school and we'll get married then? Or do I go Air Force and we just kind of risk it? Maybe you get out after a couple of years. But the great thing about the Air Force is they tell you in advance kind of what to expect, what duty stations you have.
Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? Everything is
it's the
everything
Air Force.
Is greener on the other side.
And honestly, fast forwarding, 6 years, the Air Force is so much better than the Army. I'm so glad that I stuck with the decision. But rewinding back to that point in time, we were
probably maybe regret not bringing her to the other side.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wish that we had started dating in junior year and we could have both jumped ship, but it didn't end up that way. It's so funny how it worked out because I went Air Force and I'm not flying. She stayed Army and she's the pilot in the relationship. Which is hilarious. But so she ended up going down to Fort Rucker. She said that she wanted me to stay the course and commission into the Air Force. So I commissioned as a 61 Delta. It's a physicist. And my first duty station was in Ohio, which was closer than Kansas. So I ended up just driving to see her every other weekend. And I killed my car and that one tour that we had. So in 3 years, I think
burned
I put
it to the ground.
80,000 miles on my Honda.
I was gonna say probably was like a Honda Civic because those are the only cars that can handle that type of commitment.
But I listened to like 90 audiobooks while I was doing that. But so I would go see her every other weekend and we would hang out. It was really, really stressful for her because she had to go through Sears school and then, like the undergraduate version of pilot training where she flew UH-67s and then eventually graduated and became a Black Hawk pilot. So she was doing the UH-60 course. And then she got stationed in Fort Bragg. And so I was still in Ohio at that time when she got Fort Bragg. And then I got assigned to Texas. We were hoping that she would be reassigned to Fort Hood because we were going to get married once I got reassigned to Austin, Texas. So we got married and then she didn't get reassigned to Fort Hood. She got sent to Captain's Career Course at Fort Rucker. And at that point, we had been married for like 2 years when it was a time for her to PCS again. And finally, AFPC Personnel Center in the Air Force talked with HRC Human Resource Command in the Army, and they said, "Hey, look, these are the places that she could get stationed based on his availability and his billets that are open." So they sent her to Hawaii based on the fact that they talked together, and then I got orders like 2 months after she got stationed there.
By coincidence, or like then you started working the Air Force magic of just,
Well, the Air Force magic, it happens.
it's probably
automatic.
no magic. You just have to simply ask.
No.
So,
People say that the grass is greener on the other side. If you go Army to Air Force or Marines to Air Force, it truly is greener, and it's lush and it's beautiful. It's amazing. Like, they work 8-hour days. They really take care of you from a personnel perspective. It's a much better life. I don't regret my decision at all.
2 funny Air Force stories for you. My first experience to the different side was in Okinawa, Canadian Air Force Base. And the odd part is I almost went to the Air Force because I wanted computers. And I ended up going to Marine Corps because he had a bouncy house at the church picnic, and that completely changed the course direction of my life. And when I got to Okinawa, we visited the Canadian Air Force Base. There was a Chili's on base, and occasionally you would end up there, or when you didn't have anything, you would even sometimes maybe venture to the chow hall because I heard that it was better. So we venture there, and you walk in, and there is a fish tank bigger than an office desk, and it was probably 3 feet high, just massive, just a freaking massive fish tank. And then the menu is what I remember most. There's 2 sides you can walk through. And this is like 2004. So flat screens are pretty expensive still. 2 massive, probably 50-inch TVs just running a 1-page PowerPoint with the menu. And then you walk in and you pick your own stuff. You get to sit down. They come get your tray. And I'm like, what the F is going on here? Because our menu's on a whiteboard. I have to pick up my own tray. And I got to dish out my own stuff most of the time. My only luxury is that we get an omelet bar every morning for breakfast. And I was like, this is crazy. If there is one core thing that should be common, it should be the food services. I mean, there's really no reason why it shouldn't just be, okay, let's divide this by 5. But it's not. It's like, it blows my mind. And the second one was did I lose it? Oh, Chow Hall. Oh, I think I lost it. Damn. But the Chow Hall was my favorite. That one always gets me because that was the first time I was really ever exposed to the other side. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I didn't have any exposure. Well, actually, I did cadet. So when you're a cadet at West Point, you have to go and spend time in the field, and you have to basically shadow either a lieutenant or a captain, and learn what you can while you're there. So you spend a month or 2. Oh, actually, funny story. It ties it back to James, but we're talking about James Van Peringen before this. So I had to go do what we call CTLT, Cadet Troop Leadership Training. And so I went down to MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, which was where my CTLT was. And so I shadowed an Army captain there, but it was a joint unit. And so it was an on Air Force base, and it was with a signal company. And so that's what I was expecting to do in the Army. And so that was my first exposure to the Air Force. And what stood out in my mind was the fact that they had squishy running tracks. That's the first thing. Yeah. So I went on my morning run the first day I got there, and I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, protection for your
some next level stuff.
Absolutely. It was simple things like that. It's the small things that the Air Force does, like the TVs that have the menus, so you don't have to write them down on the whiteboard every day. There was a squishy running track. And so CTLT, that was in 2012. That's the same place that I met James Van Peringen. So he was at Podcast Movement with us.
Mm-hmm. And your story came full circle almost.
Yeah.
So I want to, before we get too far into it, unpack a little bit, because you told us you had an interesting story about your 30th birthday.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I guess, turning 29, so I was 29 and 30th birthday was coming up. Morgan, my wife, had just gotten orders to Hawaii. So we were really, really excited about that. And my functional team at AFPC had basically already told me that I was a go for my next assignment being Hawaii, because they had already identified a position. I was actually trying to create my own job out in Hawaii just so I could make sure that we would be stationed together. But AFPC came through and they said they had a position for me. So now I'm the data analytics chief for this PACAF headquarters, and that came through. So we were both really, really excited because it looked like for the first time in 5 years we were going to be stationed together. And so, we knew that we wanted to start a family as soon as possible. And we hadn't really been trying, but we weren't preventing anything. Just kind of the whims of God. And so 30th birthday comes around and I'm still in Austin. Morgan's in Alabama, and she she wanted to come out and see me for my birthday because 30 is a big deal, and she wanted to make it special. So she flew out and got there Friday night, going to Saturday morning at 2 a.m. because her flight was delayed by a couple hours. And so I pick her up. We drive home. It's like 3 a.m. And she's like, well, I really, really want to give you your 30th birthday present. And so she gives me the birthday present, and it's a little box. And I'm like, why? We can wait until the morning. She's like, no, we can't wait until the morning. I was like, all right, must be a good present. So I open the gift, and in there, so the first gift that she ever got me when we started dating was a NASA t-shirt, because I was big into space and STEM and research, and it was appropriate. And I had since worn that shirt, to basically non-existence. There were holes in it and everything like that. So
Crusty armpit stains.
Exactly. All that. And so she got me a new NASA shirt. And so I took it out and I was looking at it. I was like, oh, this is great. Come full circle. 6 years later, I have a new NASA shirt. And she says, well, look down. So I look down and there's a baby NASA shirt. And then I pick up the baby NASA shirt, and under the baby NASA shirt, there's an ultrasound. And I found out that she was pregnant that way. So that was my 30th birthday gift.
That's pretty good. I was starting to think your story was that her birthday gift was how you got pregnant.
No, but that would have been a
good story too.
Show. Yeah. But
so
yeah.
How many weeks was she along when that happened?
She was 9 at that point. Or was it 9? 7? But she'd been keeping it a secret for 2 weeks. And I should have known because we try to Skype or FaceTime every night. And she kept going to sleep really early. And she's terrible at keeping secrets. So I was like, what is going on?
Something's going
I
on
kept
here.
asking her, I was like, are you okay? Like, do you have like mono or strep or anything like that? I was like, you should see the doctor. You're really tired all the time. And, she's like, no, I'm fine. But she was like, well, I really just didn't want to talk with you. I wanted to go to sleep early, A, because I was pregnant, and B, because I had the secret and I didn't want to tell you. And so she knew for 2 weeks. So I think she was 6 weeks pregnant when she told me. And it was the best present I could have ever asked for.
Probably also a scary present because you're like, whoa, what just happened?
Oh God.
I just grew up really quickly when I turned 30.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to have kids by the time I was 30. And so I was like, all right, well, this is the year. Maybe we start, seriously trying for kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, could have asked for anything better.
It is a pretty amazing story. And now it's coming full circle where you're living together and you're almost really 5 years later now just starting your family, your life together.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got the dog and
marriage.
Yeah. But we're excited.
So you're excited, but what scares you? Let's talk about some fears.
Yeah. The unknowns for sure. I obviously I've been reading parenting books and trying to figure out what to expect.
Horrible advice.
It all is, I mean, like they make it seem like a fairy tale and like everything's going to be fine and just, follow these guidances. But, I don't know. It's the unknowns and the time, like, will I have enough time to, give my kids what they deserve and what they need? Taking care of, my wife, making sure I don't sacrifice anything on that end, making sure that the relationship stays a good balance. I don't want to feel like I'm being deprived of anything. I don't want her to feel like she's deprived of anything. So it's all these worries about what, it's just the unknowns. I think from a support perspective and infrastructure perspective, we've got great support here from the military.
I like the way you described that. You're very systematic in that we got very good infrastructure and we've got very good support. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like medically, we're solid. We Triple Army Medical Hospital here. It's great. We went in for our anatomy ultrasound just last week, and so we found out what the gender of our baby is. So we're having a girl.
Congratulations!
Thank you so much. And so we did the anatomy ultrasound there, and I'm just impressed by all the technology that they have at their disposal. I mean, obviously, Tripler is one of the larger medical installations on the island, and so they need to be well equipped. But I was pleasantly surprised by all of that. So. To that end, like we have a lot of support. Now it's just the unknowns.
How is she doing?
She's doing okay. The first trimester was a little rough. She got a lot of morning sickness, and people kept telling her it was because of the peaked estrogen that she has, because it's likely a girl. And we just chalked it up to wives' tales. So she had a lot of morning sickness, and wasn't really feeling pregnancy. Just didn't like it. And then we found out it was a girl. So, I mean, I guess the wives' tales are true. If you get a lot of morning sickness, it might be a girl. But yeah,
We always followed that. My wife was more regiment on the heartburn, that the heartburn was an indication of hair. So I don't know if she has heartburn, but that would confirm the wives' tale if she does have a lot of heartburn. Because when she was pregnant with my son, she didn't have hardly any.
Huh. No, she hasn't had much heartburn, but she has had a lot of pain around her stomach, and that's to be expected. Obviously, she feels like she's huge every time we're out walking. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm a cow," and I try to comfort her as best.
The worst part is my wife's a teacher, and so all of the women there are moms mostly, and they've all gone through this. And like she'd come home one day, a couple times, it wouldn't be like one incident, and someone would come said to her like, "Wow, you're big." And I'm just like, what woman says that to another woman that actually had that and went through that? It's like, if there was ever anybody that should have empathy for another woman that is pregnant, it should be another woman that was pregnant.
Yep.
You don't tell someone that, wow, you're big, because they should know how that makes them feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is your wife nesting? Well, now you got a house. Now she can probably really start the nesting. Before it was kind of like, it wasn't official yet.
Well, and so we didn't know the gender as well. So now that we do know the gender, she's gone 100%. So I think we've been shopping like every day for the last week, for better or worse, trying to find everything that we want, trying to figure out the product lines that we want to have together, try to make sure we have all the same product lines so we can have, parts and pieces that can go together, things like that. But yeah, so I think we've got enough clothes here. Her mom really wants us to do a virtual baby shower. And so she's set up like this WordPress site for us and everything, had us update this baby register. And so now they're going to send it out to all the family friends and see if they want to participate in this virtual baby shower, which would be nice because we have all these things that we're going to buy regardless. So if they want to take care of them, that would be super helpful. Mm-hmm. But trying to figure out everything that we want, from the priorities and the must-haves to would be nice to haves and things like that.
Some advice on the buying things. So we did everything that you're doing. We went to Babies R Us, which is now defunct, but it was the thing. And we registered, and you get those guns and you just start scanning crap, and then you start getting the crap that comes in. And I can't tell you, it's marketing and the fear go hand in hand here, because you don't know what you don't know. And you think the people selling your product know something that you don't. So therefore you trust that brand that they can deliver some value that you don't yet know you need. You don't need any of it. Less is always more. By the third one, I can't tell you how much little we had to keep that baby alive. It was basically the food. It was basically the formula, a crib and a changing table. We had a couple different things. Like we did a rock and play. If you're in the bassinet type category, a rock and play is a game changer because it's much easier to put them in a rock and play and get them to go to bed. Another thing is if you don't do breastfeeding, there's something called, I believe the name is Baby Breeza, which is like a Keurig for baby milk.
Wow.
And it always keeps it at the right temperature. It has a dispenser of formula on top. You put the bottle in, push a button, 30 seconds later, you got a perfect bottle of milk. And at 3 a.m, at least for me, because I don't operate at 3 a.m. very well, you just push on that button. I hated microwaving. I hated getting the temperature just right. And you just wanted to go back to bed. Baby Breeza. It's expensive. It's like $150. But if you're going to waste money on a baby register and make people get something for you, get a Baby Breeza. That's an official endorsement by the Military Veteran Dad podcast. Right. Baby Breeza.
Baby Breeza. All right, I'm right.
Have you bought a car seat yet?
No, we figured out what we're going to buy, but going back to if people are going to take care of the expensive items, then I'll let them.
So you'll get one of those carriers that people do. I can't think of the proper name of them, and then you'll get the little thing that sticks in. I would say don't stress about that because you're not going to have it for that long. Maybe by 6 months it's going to be over. The car seat is the most strategic part when they actually come out of that carrier. And the only brand that I've ever had success with is Evenflow.
Really? So that's the brand that we wanted to get.
I've had all 3 kids in Evenflows, and it's just magic. They have one of the hardest parts of a car seat is getting the back latched and getting it all tight and proper. Evenflow has these automatic latch systems that just clip in the back, and the more you push, the more it clips. It automatically ratchets itself in there. Super easy to get in and out. And once you don't have that, you realize exactly what I'm talking about. If there's a dad out there listening, but even flow, that's my only, and we just got another car seat that's more of like a 5-point, and it's not an even flow. God, it sucks. I absolutely despise it. I hate everything about it. Just makes me frustrated. We got it out of there and put her back in the other car seat to hold on for a little bit longer because it just
That's good to
frustrates me
know.
every time I use it.
So the stroller that I wanted was the Chico Bravo, and I really wanted that one because of its portability, its weight, and it easy folding and things like that. But it's the car seat really. So it dual functions as the car seat and then the insert for the stroller
Goes on top of it.
Yeah, but Morgan really likes the even flow, and I'll trust the mother's intuition on that one. So it's good to have some feedback.
I don't think we had the even flow stroller, but theoretically, if they can nail the car seat, there is some trust that you could put in the. But ultimately, don't stress about the stroller because it's not. I mean, in Hawaii, you're probably going to be going for a lot of walks, but it's not about the stroller. It's really the couple things you want to think about is the folding and unfolding. How well does it latch? And if you were to put it in a vehicle, like how is it positioning? Like, does the wheels get in the way? Does it fit in the trunk? That's really more of what it comes down to. Because once you get more kids and it changes all the stroller type stuff, and you're probably going to have number 2 before number 1's done, and then you're going to be in a double, and then this one's going to be out of the way, and next thing you know, life gets complicated, and you're like, man, it was so much simpler when I just had to deal with one stroller.
Yep. Yeah, and so I'm more a fan of your take on being minimalist, because I know that as long as we have diapers, as long as Morgan is still functioning and feeding, that will be okay, and that it will sleep somewhere. You know, it will definitely sleep.
We had the rockers, we had the bouncers. Eventually, we got this like it's one of those things they sit in and it just kind of hangs and they bounce in. Now we had it all, and by the third one, it was all gone, and we just because as they get older, they don't need any of that stuff, and it's almost better just to buy it as a hand-me-down or buy it on Facebook, because you don't use it for all your kids. You eventually get rid of it for space-wise, especially probably military housing. It's not like you got a huge, massive storage area, and you don't want to PCS it around the country. So it's a very short-lived problem that you just want to solve with the cheapest thing you can find to solve the problem that's safe, and then move on. Because eventually, by the third one, they're moving so fast and copying the kids above them that they barely even slow down to actually use the stuff that you put them in. Once they start crawling, then they just go. Like my youngest was she's going to probably pull her training wheels off next year, and she's 3. And that will be a year earlier than her brother, and her brother did it a year earlier than her sister. So like they eventually catch up super fast. So
yeah.
And there's just so much crap to try selling you, and some of it's useful, but eventually you learn when you have the second one, I really didn't need all that. And you just get used to, maybe you're beat down more by the second one and you don't care as much, or you don't have time to stress about it because you still have a little one that you're trying to keep alive. But just go with less is more. And it's so much easy. And right now you're bored and you're nesting and you're planning and you're thinking, but on the other side, just buy it when you need it, when the problem exists, and you're like, okay, now we'll buy that thing that we said we need. Trying to get it before, you're really just creating a garage sale that you don't want to have.
I like that. Yeah, I'm going to have Morgan listen to this episode so you can hear your perspective.
I'm an overthinker, and on these types of topics, I have overthought them to the death of me. Even a baby monitor, like really
get the VTech minimalist one.
Yeah, and because eventually you want to watch them. To see what they're doing, but really in the early stages, it's not as important because they're not going to be doing anything. It's more just important to hear them. But when we spend a lot of money on those things and they don't always stay working, and you really just want to solve it with the minimal amount of features and just get through the problem, because you really just need to see that they're moving, hear them, and that's it.
Yeah, I like that.
Another good hack for you. Do you have an Alexa?
No.
Well, we had one, and we had a speaker, so you could pair a speaker to an Alexa, and we would have Alexa play lullaby music and put the speaker in the bedroom.
That's pretty nifty.
And so if you put an Alexa actually in there, you can set a sleep timer to it too. So then it would turn off on its own.
I'm more a fan of, I don't want speakers listening in my house all the time. So
I'm on that side as well, but it's one thing I don't stress about, because I don't really have anything to hide in there's something to be said for trying to be like that, but I just give up.
It's not about having anything to hide. It's about just respecting the institution of
the home. Yeah. The only upside that to consider on the other side is having every song at your disposal when they get older is really handy to play a lullaby, to play a song you want to dance to, just to have fun. There is some universal value. I mean, if you have like a Spotify, you can do the exact same thing or play it through a speaker in the house. But there is something, because even our kids now, they know how to play Kids Bob. They know how to tell it to play Sesame Street, and it's $3.99 for the unlimited Amazon Music, and it pays for itself with the amount of dance parties that go on in our house.
That's awesome. How old's your oldest?
7, 5, and 3. My middle son just turned 5 2 weeks ago.
Hey, happy birthday to him.
He was right on the edge of going into kindergarten, so we decided to push him through and just said that we were good parents and we could catch him up on whatever he was falling behind on, because maturity isn't there, but it's really 50-50, because some parents will say they held them back and other kids will say they eventually catch up, and it's one of those, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that we can figure it out and trust our parenting, and that he'll be where he needs to be. And probably the one downside is he really isn't interested in what school is interested about. Like, he doesn't like coloring. He doesn't like knowing his colors, numbers, and ABCs, but he loves building. If it's building anything, he'll do it or helping. He loves helping. But that's not what they measure.
Podcaster, entrepreneur.
Yeah, or just like a construction guy. And like right now he wants to be a train conductor, but he really loves building, but that's not how they measure kids. So it'll be a internal battle a little bit for him, but I'm confident we'll get him through. So as long as we're good parents and paying attention and doing what we're supposed to.
I think I'm just fine with you as his parents. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, my wife's a teacher. I'm a good dad. I was like, if there's ever an insurance policy you can buy not to mess up your kid by not holding him back, I feel like I'm buying about as good as you can get.
Yeah.
Without any certainty that it's going to happen or not.
Yeah.
Knowing one way or another. So now that you know that it's a girl, what do you know about names? Or are you not revealing the names yet?
So we were revealing names up until like 2 weeks ago. And then it just got to the point where everyone wanted to provide their 2 cents. And we really didn't want to have that. Yeah, we didn't want to have that outside influence. Like, if it's a good name for us,
the outside influence is real.
Yeah, it is. And we're just like, we've gotten to a point now where we kind of stopped telling our family. And they keep asking, "Oh, what do you like of this name? I really like this name." And I'm like, I don't want you to influence.
Never tell them.
Yeah. And so we like H names. We like R names. One name that we're not going to go with is Reagan. My wife liked that name. We're still, we were thinking of Avery, but I guess Avery's become too popular, so Morgan doesn't like it anymore. But yeah, so I was really open and wanting to share with everyone. And then, the feedback that we got, I was like, wow, this is not what I expected. And everyone got really personal about it. And
I'll tell you a story of why you should keep it to yourself. So we had a list, just like you. We worked through it. And I want to say maybe 3 weeks prior to her being born, my first child, we had picked it. It was going to be Zoe. And we were like, oh, finally. It was such a relief because it's stressful. Mm-hmm. And so then we told people. And my sister felt so impelled to tell us that she disagreed with our name, that she's like, she's going to be in an interview one day and no one's going to take her serious because her name is Zoe. And so she essentially ruined it for us. So then we were right back to the drawing board.
Oh, no.
Other two names we had were Brooklyn and Sophia. Going into labor, we had Brooklyn and Sophia. Those were the names we still didn't know. But I didn't realize this, but I had other forces against me that I hadn't been managing. So we had a C-section for the first one because she was induced, but then she got stuck. So we had to go to a C-section at like 10 o'clock at night. And so I'm in the C, because if you get an epidural, this is maybe something you don't know, but if you get an epidural, you can be in the room with a C-section. But if your wife doesn't get an epidural and you need a C-section, she has to be sedated.
Wow.
Section. So something to know about the epidural part. So she pulls the baby out, the doctor, and she says, "Oh, she looks like a Sophia." And I was like, damn. In that moment, she was named Sophia. I lost.
Wow. Well, that's cool. So now you have a little Sophia.
Yeah, I got to pick the middle name. I picked Grace, which was my grandmother's middle name. But
Okay.
I don't mind Sophia, and I even looking back now, I probably like it more than Brooklyn. But at the
Yeah.
time, like she pulled it out, and it looks like a Sophia, and I was like, and then my wife just bought into it, and
Yeah.
she was the tiebreaker, almost the doctor when she pulled it
Wow.
out. So even
Well,
if you can still go in and get messed up with something.
yeah. Well, so the big thing that we're thinking about is how they're going to perceive their name, because your name can really kind of have an influence on your personality and how you perceive yourself in terms of ability to accomplish things, in terms of where you stand relative to your cohorts and things like that. And so having something that's neutral, but gives you the confidence to accomplish things in your life, and that doesn't sway you one way or another, whether it has anything to do with sexuality, or if it's masculinity or femininity. It's we want the name to stand for itself. And so to that end, my philosophy is that they only have one distinctive name. The middle name is going to be my wife's maiden name for all of our kids, which is kind of unique. And so her maiden name is White. And so we know that for all of our kids, they're going to have their first name. So the name that we're not going with would have been Avery, and then her middle name would have been White, and then last name Hart. So we think we're going to stay consistent in that regard, to where there's only one name that we can screw up. The others are just inherited.
On my wife's side, there wasn't anything special, but on my side, it was always your dad's first name.
Oh yeah.
Like my middle name is Daniel, and that's my dad's first name. His middle name is Robert, and that was his dad's first name.
I like that.
So maybe you can start
why.
a tradition if that's not a tradition on the son side.
Yeah, definitely. So I think my middle name was my grandfather's middle name. I don't know why I got his middle name and not his first name, but yeah.
One thing about the name, though, I can definitely tell you're gonna look back after this baby's born and be like, how did we ever find time to stress about this? Because you're in the weeds, man. You are way in there. And the one thing I will give you is some grace, because I can tell that it's that you are thinking about this a lot. Whatever you do name them, or her in this case, it's more about what help to define it as than anything else. Whether they believe their name means something is whether you told them that they meant something. Yeah. And I think it's if you create the limiting belief that your name is holding you back. If say your parents didn't breathe life into you, or it's almost like your name just gets attached to the emotional baggage that you create as you grow up. So if you raise a confident child, they'll identify their name as a confident name. So, and especially as a girl, like I often will tell my daughter that, especially because I don't even know what world she's going to be going into as a teenager compared to the teenage world that's now. It's crazy. But I often tell her and just understand that like her opinion of herself is one that matters. What she thinks of herself is what matters. What other people think doesn't matter, as long as she knows what she thinks about herself is the right one. And telling her that she's beautiful and that she's good enough, and that that I love her. Like these are things that, and proud, like these are things that are giving them the confidence that they're not looking for that external validation. So I think it's more about your parenting style than it is about the name itself. As long as you don't have like some odd name that has some joke that automatically comes to mind when you say it.
Yeah.
A funny one, my wife's mom, her first name is Candy, which when you name the child it seems odd naming your child Candy, because it's just like candy, Candy. Mm-hmm. But she married last name Land. So her name is Candy Land.
Wow.
So you could actually stress this to the point of suicide and still F it up, because she'll find someone to marry and then blow it out of the water.
Man, yeah. And I mean, that's the one thing that we're trying. Well, we're trying to do as much as we possibly can to prepare for any eventuality. So we have time now. So we're like trying to think of all of the things that we can avoid screwing up now, so that we implement them in advance of the child arriving, with the hope that we've done everything that we possibly can to make sure that we're going to be successful.
And you have a year to change it afterwards as well.
Yeah. Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh,
up to a year, you can change it. Also, I'll give you an inside tip. The paperwork really isn't due. And it's not really, I don't even know if it's probably, is it really due, but you have pretty much the entire time you're at the hospital to name it, to name her. So because I want to say with maybe Dylan, or Lily. Maybe we weren't 100% sure on the middle name and type stuff. So they give you the paperwork and they give it to you in a folder, but it's something that you can have those 2 days. It's 2 days if you have a normal birth and then 3 if you C-section. So, but you have that entire time to really get the paperwork right and to figure out they're in your hands and connect with whoever she is or whatever future you see in her eyes when you look at her. So know that it's not like, oh my God, it's out. She doesn't have a name. Oh my gosh. Just breathe. It'll be okay.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm thinking of. We're trying our best, and what I'll do is, if in 10 years' time I've screwed up the name royally, and she hates her name, I'll point her to this podcast episode and I'll say, listen, we tried as hard as we possibly could to make sure that you had a good name, and we did as much as we could, but it just didn't pan out.
I haven't given this advice to a new dad, but you may enjoy it. And I've heard my wife just repeat it because she brought it up, and I was like, I've been saying that for like 2 years, but she didn't hear it until she heard someone else say it. That if you have things you want to say to your daughter, even from the very beginning, start a Gmail account and keep it to yourself, and then write emails to it throughout her life, and then give it to her when it's an appropriate time of things that were on your mind, or even pictures as like a time capsule. Because there's things that you're thinking of what you're scared about, or I've also seen it hurt given for like dads that get separated and they physically aren't a part of their kid's life, and there's no reconciling with the mom. That a way to be a part of your kid's life is to write their side of the story and send it to an email, and then when they're old enough to understand what was going on, they can look back and say, this is what dad's side of it was, and understand that he wasn't the guy that maybe the mom was portraying him, and it allows you to still have a voice, but at a different time in the kid's life.
Interesting. I really like that.
And I think you being, you feel like, I feel like you're a writer as well. So I feel like you'd have some passionate words to describe.
I'm probably a better writer than I am, a communicator any other way. So I really like that. The one thing that I have noticed that I'm trying to think about based on all the research and reading that I've done thus far are like 3 things stand out in my mind. It's the stories that you tell them that sticks with them. The questions that you ask them that kind of determine their outlook, and the external feedback that they get from you, whether or not you're an optimist, a pessimist, and then the questions that you ask, the way that they frame the questions in their life. A good example of one is like, what questions did you ask today at school? And then the reinforcement thing could be, if they did well on a paper, for example, and they got an A, you could tell them either, oh, you're very smart, or, oh, you worked really hard on that. And that helps them to frame certain perspectives in life, and it gives them a mental toolkit to fall back on. So if they have self-talk that tells them that they're just a smart person, the first time that they experience failure, they'll tell themselves that they're not smart, and that they're getting dumber. But if you reinforce the fact that when they get an A, it's because they worked hard, then when they get a D, it's just because they didn't put enough work in, and it reinforces strong work ethic. And so I've been doing a lot of research on psychology and then parenting to try and prepare myself for what I need to say to our daughter when she's born.
What you hit on there is the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And I heard a story in a podcast where a dad was actually, he got a little bit schooled in this because he was talking to a Navy SEAL that really knew this stuff. And he told a story about his son wrestling. And his son was at a weight limit that he was just crushing it, winning. And then he leveled up and just lost over and over, and he wanted to quit right away. And the guy he was interviewing quickly pushed back and said, that's because you rewarded the result that he was getting every time and not the effort that he put in, because he put in little effort to get that. And then when we focus on the result, that it was gone. So you really needed to almost always reinforce the effort, and the result was irrelevant. That as long as they equate to what they put into it, that's what they need to connect in, to understand that if they're unhappy with something in their life, that means they have the ability to grow through it and just put more effort towards it.
Yeah. And it's about the routine rather than the outcome. And if they're not enjoying the process of practice in whatever sport they're doing, if they're not enjoying the process of homework, then maybe they need to change how they're doing it or change what classes they're taking, because process is everything in life. And if you're not enjoying the process, then you're not going to enjoy the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard
so,
a crazy statistic, even like valedictorians and anybody that makes it to the top of those classes, the statistic of how many of those actually do something remarkable is very low.
yeah.
Because their entire life was focused on the result and not what they were trying to do to get there.
Yeah. Or, wanting to become a doctor because it's prestigious, or wanting to become a lawyer because it's prestigious. And then they become lawyers. And I think lawyers are the worst when it comes to drinking and alcoholism. They drink their livers to death because that was something that they saw as, a good position to be in life. And then they get there and they've achieved the prize, but they didn't enjoy the process while they were doing it. And so they drank themselves to death, and then they quit. Clark, is it Richard Clark? He's the Unemployable podcast host. He was a lawyer, hated every second of it, and then eventually became an entrepreneur and a podcast host. And so he's a good example. And I don't know if it's just lawyers, but you have to enjoy the process. Otherwise, you get to the conclusion or the outcome, and you don't like where you're at.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said even in the military life, that a lot of military life, maybe not on the grass greener on the other side Air Force, but a lot of dads say they're doing something noble and that's something that they're trying to achieve, and that sacrifice is worth the sacrifice from their family. Mm-hmm. But that's really like a credit card that you keep borrowing from, and eventually they call calling, and either it ends in divorce, or maybe your kids grow up not knowing you or resenting you, or you're not even part of their life. And you really have to have it the other way around, that your family is always number one. And Navy SEAL Andy Stump described this best. This is you can kind of short the entire process of being a dad. That as a Navy SEAL, he was effectively trained to be a super killer in the most highest fashion of any military branch. And everybody knows what a Navy SEAL is trained to do. And he said, but the effectiveness of every skill that I know is the limit of how far my bullet can travel. That no matter how far or how better I make myself as a Navy SEAL, I still have that limitation. As a dad, we have literally decades and generations into the future as our effectiveness, depending on how we show up for our kids. Yeah. And that's powerful, because that's what military dads are gifted. When we join the military, we have a very well-rounded view of the world, and we can gift that to our kids to go out there and just knock it down and change the world for a better place. But we really have to recognize what those tools the military gave us and understand how we can deliver them to our kids so that they can go out into the world and do great things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And actually, one of the reasons as to why I wanted to go Air Force over Army is, so I was enlisted Army for 2 years before I got a commander's recommendation to go to West Point. And I really, really didn't like working 12 to 15-hour days, just because you're up at 5, go to PT at 6, and you don't get off until 6 or 7, depending on what your duty is for that day. I didn't think that was a good way to raise a family. And when I had the opportunity to pursue commissioning into the Air Force, I knew that based on my cousin's feedback and my time at CTLT, that an average day in the Air Force, even at a high operational tempo unit, was no later than 5 or 6 at night. And they really do respect family time. And I thought that if I wanted to do this long term, or at least have the possibility of doing it long term, that the Air Force would be the best branch to be in, because now I can see myself being in the Air Force for 20 years plus, because they respect your family time, because they respect the 9 to 5, and they prioritize things, they systematize things to where you're going to get it done within the duty days constraints. Otherwise, it doesn't get done. They've just built the structure of the Air Force to where you can facilitate everything that needs to be done in a 9 to 5, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That does sound good. I've heard a lot of horror stories on recruiting commands as well. And I often feel like the military misses a big opportunity to let service members recharge on recruiting duty, get time with their families. But honestly, they burn them to the ground even more. And it's even worse than what you get on active duty almost. That there is no barrier or firewall, because it's on you and you got numbers to fill. So go fill them.
Yep.
Hell with whatever the consequences are.
And it's funny, you have a reverse effect when you're needy. If the perception that you give people is that you're desperate to fill seats, then people are less likely to join your branch. It's
not out of goodwill. It's out of, I need you, and I'm going to manipulate potentially to get you to do what I need you to do.
Yeah. And as an ROTC recruiter for the last 2 years at the University of Texas, we didn't have a quota to fill. And so people that came to me, I told them our standards for admission. I told them about the application process that we set up because we wanted to filter out poor candidates from quality candidates. And since we set that program up, we pretty much doubled our admissions because we made it more selective and elite, which in people's minds made them think, well, if I consider myself to be the best, I want to spend time with the best and I want to up my game. And so in order to elevate my game, I'm going to choose Air Force over anything else. And I'm going to choose ROTC over being a civilian student because that's going to elicit the most competitive outcome of my potential. And so that's the perspective that we took. And not only did I have to work less, but I was able to attract more bright minds. And so that, I think that's the perspective or the approach that the military needs to take.
So let's switch gears here for a minute. When it comes to your marriage, I bet there's a lot of fear and anxiety related around moving in together because in some ways you've known each other, but when you're living together, that's when you really start knowing someone. What's your battle plan to get through these first few months without the baby and to make sure that you transition into a solid marriage living together?
Yeah. So, I mean, coming into it, I really wanted to give it my all and give it full throttle to see kind of, what sticks and figure out where I can throttle down, see what, give it everything across all dimensions, all aspects across the whole spectrum and see what she appreciates most and then do more of that, double down on that. And then I can throttle back in other areas. But trying to do as many tasks around the house to make sure that she feels appreciated, to prioritize her over anything else, to make sure that she feels taken care of, especially given that she's pregnant. I try to do everything from cooking to cleaning, and then it'll work itself out too. We've already kind of found a balance, which I think is important in every marriage. You just kind of figure out what each person is inclined to do based on what naturally occurs, and figuring out what she likes to do more than other things. And so still just figuring it all out really, because we have, I guess the last time that we lived together was really in college, and we spent every hour.
You both have grown up a lot since then too.
Exactly. So we've matured a lot. We know what we want in life. We know what we like to do in our pastimes. And so we have two lives, but and I think that's important to the marriage. You need to have your own hobbies and passions.
Mm-hmm.
So
if anything, it's probably a little bit better because you have a solid routine in your own life of things that bring you joy. And now you just have to try to make sure you try to balance both of those things that bring you joy. And then also that they bring joy to both of you together.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys read the Love
really
Language
loves,
book?
We love it. Yeah, love that book. Yeah.
That's an easy cheat manual to figure out where to focus on that. That I read that book a while back, and it opens up a lot of just insights into the process that you don't actually get into marriage. It's often it's super crazy how marriage is perceived in global culture, because we recognize we need to go to school to be a doctor. We recognize we need to go to school to be an electrician. We need to go to school to learn these advanced skills. But somehow that we were just born with the innate ability to have an awesome marriage without any additional skills is something that most people don't actually recognize as an issue. That and then wonder why the results of divorce rates, and it's like you just don't wake up and poof, it's going to happen perfectly. It's something that you have to learn and grow to, and there are processes that work better than not. And if you try doing it through failure, it's like trying to be a doctor. You're going to kill 100 people, but you might actually figure out how to be a liver surgeon. But there's going to be a lot of dead bodies laying around in the process. And
yeah,
maybe not the best analogy, but it's a similar analogy where you're trying to figure it out. And the one thing that I think it's often culture can get it backwards is that when you have kids, and this is going to be the biggest thing that gets stuck in, is that you focus all your attention on the kids because that's just, you feel like that's where the attention needs to go. But re-anchoring, especially in the military, because in the military, the priorities are always changing, and always reaffirming that your wife is number one and your kids are number two, and making sure your kids even know that they're number two is important. We had Phil O'Black on the podcast last spring, and he gave us a big idea of kissing your wife first before you hug your kids, and making sure that, not making sure, but letting them see that, because then that says that I'm
Yeah.
happy to see you, but I'm more happy to see my wife, who's going to be there after you leave me.
Oh yeah.
Your kids are guaranteed to betray you, and your wife is something there forever, and you need to live your life every day with that philosophy, not something that, okay, the kids are gone, let's figure out how to be married again, because most likely you're not. And that's usually when they get divorced, is when I don't really know you anymore. I feel like we're strangers.
Yeah. Yeah. So we actually read that book. We struggled a lot, long distance, when she was at Fort Rucker near the end of flight school. We were just struggling to keep up with a long distance relationship. And I think everyone goes through that. This was after 2 years, and we were already engaged at that point. But it was really hard. So we read that book and, figured out our love languages. And so she's more of a, an action, and, presence, type, appreciation, person. And I'm more of like a words and language. Um, but yeah, so that really helped. And then to the end of prioritizing, your wife, uh, we actually, I don't know if this will work out, but our plan before we have kids is that we want to go on a week-long trip by ourselves each year. So every year since we've been together, we've traveled 2 times each year. And so we've gone to places like Peru or Iceland or Amsterdam or Italy. So we've done all these trips, and we go twice a year. So we're going to go one trip with a family and one trip by ourselves from now on, once we have our little girl. And I think that's a good way to make sure that you prioritize your relationship with your wife, because you demonstrate that by action, that this is something that we prioritize, and that we want to keep up. And so we're going to have our kids stay with my in-laws, her parents, and watch them for a week while we go do whatever we want.
The first part will be hard, because she'll probably be a mama bear, because and even if you can't tell, you really have no idea until that they hold that baby in their hands. But I like what you're saying, because for dads listening out there, choosing to invest in those areas are super important. And there's one part, you're at a later season, but often if you start having kids early, you don't really realize that the debt you're almost instantly taking on, that you're putting your life on hold for 20 years. That there are hundreds and hundreds of things that you won't do because you have kids now. And you're going to be that same case, even though you're having kids when you're 30, that reinforcing and connecting to those ideas and finding ways to still continue to feel like you're living your life, and that you're not automatically just taking care of your kids. Because I think this is what leads to midlife crises, is because there's so much time where we're just invested in, and we're not actually living. We're just living the life to keep them alive, or to pay the bills so that they can do all the crazy things that they want. But inside, we're really just dying slowly. And when you reach 40, you're like, oh my God, my life's half over. I haven't lived, because we had kids when we were 21. And I was in a big damn hurry when I got out in 2007 to have kids and get married and catch up. But the one thing, wisdom I've learned since then, is that, and it came from the Czech Republic where I work for my company, is that they spend all of their 20s learning to love the person, which is kind of what you did. Find someone, love that person, and just learn to live life with them and do life. And then in their 30s, they settle down and have kids. And that's a lesson I want to pass on to my kids, that I want them to fully have felt like they lived a little, even if it's something that doesn't even make sense. And by natural course, it's not the normal way. If they're figuring out who they want to be or who they are, it's all good, because that's really what those 20s are meant. In the US, I feel like we get it so backwards. It's all about consumerism. It's all about these patterns. It's all about doing what the Joneses are doing next door, or what your Facebook friends are doing. And that's what I had. I had all of my friends were having kids. They were getting married, and I was sitting in Oak, and I was still single. And I'm like, I just felt stuck. But in reality, I was figuring out who I was, and I just didn't keep on doing it a little bit when I got home. So I like what you're saying there, because it's definitely going to lead dividends that get you to where you need to be when the kids leave, and you'll already have this habit of exploring life, and eventually you'll be able to take the kids on these trips. And I'm a big believer that you have to get your kids outside of their life in order to figure out how they fit into their life. And they need to see different ways in the world and what people do with their life in the world, because that's how they figure out whether they're a square peg or a round peg or a diamond peg. And school ain't going to do that for them. It's got to teach them, but it's not going to teach them who they are.
Yeah. And we're also trying to demonstrate to them or be a role model to them from the perspective of continuing our education and making sure that we still continue to live our life and be our own people. So what Morgan plans on doing is, after we have our first couple of kids, she wants to go back to school. And even though she's a pilot right now, she's passionate about baking. And so she wants to go to Cordon Bleu in Paris and get her master's in patisserie. I don't know if you get your master's in that, but she would get an advanced degree from that, which she can use her GI Bill for. And even though we're having our daughter in December, I'm still enrolled to start another master's program in the spring of next year. So it's continuing to educate yourself, continuing to be a good role model for your children, to show them that even though life is a struggle, you can still find time to be successful. And that's the plan. I don't know if it's going to happen because, we have a plan until we make contact, but we'll see if it works. But that's our hope, is that we can be a good role model and that we can be successful outside of, the day job or things like that. And that we can show them, we can be the proof that you can be as successful as you want to be.
I like that. And the one thing that what you're saying there is focusing on still having a plan. But if there's one thing that I've learned throughout the time of all the plans I've had, having the 3 kids, is that when you try to figure out what's right and wrong, always balance it with time is the most important aspect, because that's how they spell love, Time. And every time you choose something that's not them, there is a choice and a deficit created in their life. And you always got to make sure that you're investing that time, because those first years go by so fast. And every time you've heard an adult say like, oh, make sure you pay attention because those first years go by so fast, that's really just code that they weren't there. Mm-hmm. So always try to reflect on that time, because, and here's some wisdom that I'm proud of myself if I worked through it. But in June, I was a stay-at-home dad for 10 days. My wife went to China for a teaching, kind of like interchange teaching. And I was a single dad for 3 days, and I took vacation day and I was all in. And I am so thankful I did that, because I'm positive when I'm 50, it's only 2 months and I still look back at it as a happy 10 days, that it was the craziest 10 days. But that 10 days will be something when I'm 50, I will reflect back as the strongest memory of these years. And making those memories, because when you're at 50, you're not going to wish you did that master's. That's always what you have to think about is, what am I going to wish looking back when I'm 50 that I did more of now? Because literally these years that you're entering into never come back. There is no comeback. There is no, I can do it later. Mm-hmm. And I was gifted this advice last fall by Nick Matash. We had in the podcast as bonus episode number 2 in July, that he talked about seasons. And so many times you're a little bit like me. There's always ideas. There's always things I could be doing. And there's never a lack of ideas. It's just lack of time to do them and which one you want to do. And really, by giving this idea of seasons, that there are seasons of life, and there's seasons of life where different things fit in easier. And so I love traveling. I love airplanes. I love experiencing new cultures. And I love traveling for work. But at the same time, that's time away from my kids. And I'm like, there's no reason why that's not a later season of my life. Even public speaking, I want to be a public speaker, but that would take me away from my kids now. So by framing things in seasons, you allow yourself to really focus and be dad now and say, okay, these are goals I have, but these are just different seasons of my life where I'm going to achieve them. And that took so much burden off me to try to have all my goals accomplished right away, because you are going to write checks that you're going to wish you could have back when you're 50.
Yeah.
When you have those ambitious goals.
Well, it's unique. This is my plan, at least. And I do agree with the sentiment that you expressed with the master's degree, is that you can always do it later. But I'm having this, so in the military and the Air Force in particular, they let you kind of work on your master's on the job. And so if I'm going to be out of that, if I'm going to be out of the house and I'm going to be at work away from my family, then why not do a master's?
In that case, because the time's already gone. It's just being banked in a different category, and you get a bigger ROI on it.
Exactly. And so if I'm being paid for it and my boss lets me work on grad school while I'm there because it aligns with my mission, then I will. So that's the only twist there. Mm-hmm. But I agree with everything else. And I don't know if it'll ever happen, but my goal in life is to become self-sufficient to where I can spend as much time as possible with my family. And even in the Air Force, I'm trying to make it to where I can spend more time with family. I worked with an organization called AFWorks before I PCS'd here, and I still work with them. And I run 2 programs for them, one of which is a remote work program for active duty Air Force. And so if we can get that up and running off the ground, it's in prototype phase right now. We're doing it with ROTC cadets and AFWorks employees, but remote work as a military personnel member would be amazing for time with family, because I don't think that we're that much productive at work, with your butt in the chair. I think that there can be a lot accomplished at home, and that you don't have,
especially for the office jobs that are just like,
they
aren't really military jobs. You just wear a uniform and you punch keyboards just like a civilian would.
Exactly. And you can do that at home unless it's classified, but you can dispatch that work.
Yeah. And there's kind of 2 sides of that. There's one, I feel like there's one military dad where they hide at work because they're afraid to come home. But then there's other ones where, like us, where you want to be there and trying to create an organized life to make that happen as well. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I mean, these are all possibilities. It's just a matter of trying to get one to come to fruition.
Yeah. And you're always thinking, so that's really where your brain needs to be. And you're always looking back in those questions of what you could do better and analyzing it in a military mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of being a military veteran dad, is that you have the training, how to evaluate commitment and time obligations for certain things that you commit to. And so approaching things from a systems perspective before you even commit or obligate yourself is really, really helpful, because not everyone has that training. Not everyone knows how to create a regiment in their life to where they can prioritize family. Like, we just have such good training to fall back on that I wouldn't trade my military experience for anything.
Well, we definitely have to have you back on the podcast when you are a dad to check in on, see how you're doing and how the pulse is.
I'd be like, oh my God, I haven't slept in 7 days.
Yeah. You want me to do what? You want to do a podcast? I haven't done one of those in months. I don't even remember what a podcast is. It's been so long.
Yeah, we'll see. On my podcast, I'm trying to build up a backlog of episodes that I have ready to produce. They're production ready episodes that are pre-recorded and just ready to push the go live button, so I can have a repository ready for when our baby girl comes.
I like that. So as a new dad, so you're not a dad, but I usually like to wrap up the episodes with a piece of advice. As a new dad, soon to be, what's a piece of advice you want to leave for other dads who are expecting that haven't become a dad yet?
Well, so we're still, have yet to be in the trenches with everyone else, but
you're in the trenches now. It's just a different trench. It's not no joke when you're going through that first one, because it's almost like going through an enemy zone, because every hump you go over, you really have no idea what's on the other side of that hill.
Yeah.
And you just try to keep doing the skirmish, and every day you feel like you got under control, but then sometimes the enemy pushes you back. It's just as crazy in the first, when you're pregnant, as it is on the other side.
Well, we're a fan of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and so we're trying to embody that and trying to bring that perspective, that mindset into life, and doing whatever we can to make sure that we're fully prepared for any possibility that comes up or arises once she's actually here. Trying to do all the things that we should as parents before the first baby comes, reading to it and talking with the baby, even while it's in the belly, and, playing music for it and things like that. Just letting it hear our voices so that it gets used to it, playing music for it so that we can lull her to sleep if she feels comforted by music when we're trying to swaddle her and things like that. So just doing as much as we can on the front end so that we're prepared on the back end.
Mm-hmm. And I think the best advice I can give you back is control is an illusion. You'll have it very rarely. And in those first few months, you just need to hang on, because it'll all be gone before you know it. And there'll be a day where you're like, man, all I wish was that child for asked me one more time to say, can I have a hug? Even though it was on that night we were trying to get them to go to bed and they're 3, you're just like, just go to bed so I can watch Netflix. But when they're older and then swearing at you for something you did, it's like, man, it was so much easier when they just asked for another hug.
Yeah.
It all goes by so quick.
I like that. So I'll keep that in the back of my mind, hopefully every night.
Every night when you're using the baby breather to fill up their bottle, you're like, I'm going to oh, this isn't so bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can do this. You got it. Well, Thom, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and you being the first dad before dad. I'm really excited to share this because I know there's other dads out there, and those dads are just as struggling as you are. And what most military dads aren't good at is having and creating a community to not feel alone. So if we can make a dad not feel alone being a new dad, we've accomplished our mission tonight.
Absolutely.
Well, Thom, you have a great the rest of your day, because what time is it there in Hawaii?
Let's see here. Yeah, right now it's 4:18.
So you're pretty good. I've always thought it was more of a time zone shift. It doesn't seem that bad.
Yeah, you're Midwest, right?
Yeah, so it's 9 o'clock here.
Yeah.
Well, you have a great rest of your evening, and we'll talk soon, and best of luck on the new one.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
That's a wrap. And thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.